Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyle Gold and Cam Hirosaki. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Hi, welcome to Unsheathed number 37. This is a very propitious number for the Unsheathed podcast. We've done 37 in a row. I'm Kyle Quickie Mark Gold.
Quickie Mark's The Simpsons.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't want to be quick stop because that's not sexy.
Oh. Okay, that's a good point. Quicker stop. Eh?
That's not sexy either.
No, it's not. I'm Cam Hirosaki, and number 37 has nothing to do with why my mouth is full right now.
No, Kit put some things in our muzzles right before the podcast started, so that's why. Anyway, 37.
Get back here.
Thank you, and a shout out to Kevin Smith, who's also a famous podcaster, for giving this otherwise, marginally noticeable prime number much more significance in all of our lives.
Yeah, if there are any listeners out there that don't get the 37 reference, look it up and you'll get it soon enough.
I wonder if 37 has its own Wikipedia page now.
Well, you do know if you go to Wikipedia and just type in a number, it assumes that you're looking for the year. And then you have to go to disambiguation on that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So if you type in 37, it assumes you mean like 37 AD.
Oh, if you go to Kevin Smith's page on Wikipedia, I'm sure it mentions 37 in there. So
if you go to 37 parentheses, number and parentheses, that will tell you what you need to know.
All right. Good tips.
I'm going to pull it up on my phone and see if I'm right.
While Cam Hirosaki is checking his phone, by the time you hear this, the Ursa Major Awards voting for 2009 will be closed. We thank all of you who went out there and took the time to let the artists and writers that you like know that you like them. The voting in the Ursa Major Awards grows every year, and we're really happy to be bringing more awareness to it in the furry community.
You can have like Ursa Major ribbons.
Well, they already do. If you win, you get like a plaque kind of thing. So anyway, thanks to all of you. We look forward to hearing the results, which will come out sometime in about a month or so at one of the little conventions that takes place. I don't know which one it's at this year. Do you know offhand?
No, I don't.
It's been at Rocket City. It's been at Morphicon. It's been at Califer.
Was it at All for Fun one year?
Oh, it might have been, but it's not going to be this year.
Oh, yeah.
Also, I had a bit of interest in tidbit forwarded my way this week. One of my fans pointed out that Pendant of Fortune was on a additional reading list for a English course, graduate level English course in the humanities, about postmodern culture and like the boundaries between human and animal, and they were reading all kinds of essays and other novels and stuff, and they said, at the bottom of the list was like furry fiction, for example, Kyle Gold's Pendant of Fortune.
If you're going to pick furry fiction as your sort of postmodern deconstruction theory, I'm not sure why you'd go right for the gay porn, but hey.
It's I'm not questioning why either, but
ours is not to question why.
Ours is but to write porn. That's it. And let's see. I've been working on. What have I been working on? Oh, I've been working on that out of position bonus story that I promised people. That's kind of about done. I need to let it sit for a couple days and then look at it again. But
let it percolate.
It's pretty much over. It ended up being like 8,000 words. Which was longer than I expected it to be. But I kind of like it, and it gives me a perspective for going back to edit the sequel, too.
That's cool. I had sort of a busy week. I haven't gotten a whole lot done, but I am still working on that possibly soon-to-exist novel I've been alluding to. But the last few scenes I've done have been a lot more fluid than the ones that came before it for whatever reason.
As opposed to containing more fluid.
Yeah, it's not those kind of scenes, actually. I'm not sure how much of that is going to be in what I have left to write. I don't know if I'd say it's getting wacky, but the situation is playfully bizarre, and I find that easy to write for some reason.
Perhaps because you're playfully bizarre.
Oh, maybe. That's very flattering. Thank you.
So I think I listened to too much Notcast because I was expecting you to reply, "Your mom's playfully bizarre."
I was going to say, like, playfully bizarre can be like the opposite of fat and suspicious, which is their sort of new tag for things.
Right. All right. So yeah, it's kind of quiet. We don't have much in the way of convention stuff coming up for a while either.
Yeah, we just broke through the winter convention season.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. And I know people who went to all 4 cons.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, how many did I go? I went to 2.
I know people who went to FC, Furry Fiesta, FWA, and FCN.
And FCN, right. FCN
Yeah.
was the other one.
I'm just like,
oh, cool.
How do you do that? How do you have that much vacation time and money?
You know,
I don't.
Some people love their fandom.
Well, I love me some fandom too. That's why I do this podcast for y'all.
Exactly. So we got a bunch of questions. We have a few questions on, these kind of shook out this way chronological wise. We have a few questions on editing that we had kind of been letting sit. And then we have a few more questions of a more personal variety, with which we will close out the show. So I think you started last time because my voice was impaired. So I'll start off this one. Dear Otter and Fox, as I've now listened to all your NaNoWriMo podcasts, I'm struck by how often in discussion you separate the act of writing the first draft with the art of editing the final copy. In the process of my writing, it's not something I've often thought about, but I can't deny that the separation is entirely appropriate. Now that you've mentioned it enough times for it to sink in, I'm starting to equate it to how it takes both a grubby, messy miner and a careful, exact gem cutter to produce fine gemstones. Of course, in the world of material things, the raw materials and the finished product are produced by different people, but in fantasy production, the profit margins are not so great that this is customary. Writers must fill both roles, alternately digging deep within them for plots and characters, and then polishing their prose until it shines. Since a published work looks so much different than the words we first toss haphazardly about the page, and because NaNoWriMo is fast approaching, and in fact is gone by this time, sorry, I wonder, would it be helpful to your listeners to take a short passage from one of your stories and read it aloud before and after the editing process? Perhaps an opening scene that failed to get the plot in motion, or a timid jump moment that grew teeth and attacked suddenly after revision. I think it could be very enlightening, as both of you have had a lot to say about what one can do to rewrite a story, but have so far not had examples of your own work. Would each of you be so kind as to indulge your listeners on this? From Drenth Kuhn.
First off, I like the analogy that he came up with there with the, mining and then gemstone refinement, and how, in this case, the writers, you have to do both jobs yourself. And I started to think, what if those were different jobs? I was like, wow, if my job was to take somebody else's first draft and then turn a good story out of it, I would hate my life. I would not want that to be my job.
Well, there are people who do that. I mean, there's professional editors, and there's people who guide authors, but while I appreciate the analogy is kind of inexact, because everybody knows what a finished gemstone is supposed to look like. There's a bunch of standard cuts that you make. I find, the better the gem cutter, it's just that he can create these cuts with more precision and, without cracking the crystal and such. Mm-hmm. The problem is that when you have a raw first draft of a story, only the writer knows what the finished product of that is supposed to look like.
Exactly, which is why if somebody, gave you a first draft, like, here, make a story out of this, you'd be like, you're
right.
not, yeah.
Now, there are things that an editor can do to help a writer realize their vision. I've worked with people on the X anthology to try to... In a couple cases, people didn't really need much help. in some other cases, I was trying to see, it was clear that their themes were kind of going all over the map, and I tried to pin them down and just have a discussion and say, who's the central character? What are you trying to get across here? Do you see how you're sort of building tension here, and then it diffuses, and then you build it up again, and you never get a real climax to, coin an Eton phrase. As far as would it be helpful to take a short passage and read it aloud, I think it might be helpful from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
Because you could say, here's kind of a clumsy first draft. The problem is that I don't know that I have particularly good examples, because a lot of what I was doing, I was going back through a story today. I was consulting with Kit on the Out of Position sequel for a little bit. And a lot of it is just tightening up. And it's little things like, going through and taking out the verb to seem. Seems or seemed.
I do that.
Taking out little wishy-washy qualifiers like a little or a few or a couple or most of or some of. It's taking sentences that go like, it seemed like he was a little bit angry, and turning that into
he was
angry.
Yeah.
And I don't know how helpful that would be.
Yeah. The other thing with me is I don't know how much... I don't really keep stuff from when I rewrite it and edit it. I mean, if I have scenes that I cut, I'll usually put them in a file and sort of set them up by themselves so that they're not just gone forever. But if I have a scene that I've rewritten a few times but I still kept it, I probably don't have the pre-edited version of that anywhere.
Well, then, and with me, I only save drafts at major points.
Yeah.
I only sort of back save. So there might have been a sentence that the first time I wrote it was kind of clunky, but then if at any point I'm going back into the story to check for reference to see what I'm doing, or just to read back through to see where I was, if I notice something clunky, I'll just change it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do the same thing.
That said, maybe we can, at some point in the future, we can devote a show and just take something that we write as a first draft.
Yeah.
And maybe you and I can just sit down and we'll write a first draft of something. And
then, we need to specifically plan for it.
Yeah, and then we'll go back and try to edit it. The one example that I do want to bring up, though, with my very first novel, which is all full of stuff that I've learned how to do better, but the novel is entirely it's very tight third person on Vol, and the original first chapter, which I believe I posted somewhere on LiveJournal years and years ago. The original first chapter was from Sear's perspective, coming into the tavern and looking for Vol.
Okay.
And that... It was also a little more bawdy than it is currently. But I think in the actual published version, Vol's just kind of hanging out with a wolf, and he's like... hey, I might be able to get him to go back to the room, and, we could fool around and do stuff. And in the original first draft that I had, Sear comes into the tavern looking for him, and she can't find him anywhere until there's a wolf kind of making tense and jumping noises, and it turns out Vol's under the table giving him a blowjob. And the editor suggested that was perhaps a little bit too much to start the book with. It gave us an impression of him as just completely sex-obsessed, which was true, but not the first thing you wanted the reader to think about him. You wanted the reader to build sympathy for him. And also, the first scene kind of broke the fact that it was supposed to be tight third person on him.
Yeah.
So I ended up rewriting the whole first scene. The only thing that lost was there's a scene at the end of the book where Vol gets a wolf to go under the table in a bar for him, and it kind of lost the symmetry, but I think that was a...
I think that the world of artistic license will forgive your lack of blowjob symmetry.
What a sad thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean... Is it fearful symmetry?
No, there were no tigers involved.
Okay.
But, so we will try to prepare for that. In the meantime, I know there's a couple people out there who are happy and skilled editors, and if any of you guys would like to send us a first draft paragraph and then a final draft of that, we will incorporate it into a show, and we'll try to read those aloud at the same time as we read our examples, and maybe we'll do just a whole show on editing, which would have been a good thing to do for Nano Edmo, but that was March, so we lose.
March was a busy month for everyone.
Yes, it was. So, moving on. But thank you for the idea, Drenth. We'll definitely do something with that.
Yeah, I think that has promise.
We'll have our tech savvy manager put it down on our list of things to do.
So our next email, Dear Foxy and Ottery, first off, congrats on the release of Bridges. I can't wait till I get my foxy paws on it. I think that's congrats more to you, Kyle. I don't know how much I had to... Oh.
I believe, is that Fraudus? Because I think he did get his foxy paws on it.
It is.
Yeah, okay.
Secondly, I'm nearly finished writing the first draft of the secret project I mentioned in my New Year's resolutions. I'm currently 1,200 words into it, and my goal, because of my insane schedule, is to have it tripled and finished within the next 2 weeks if possible. If I don't reach that goal, then you guys may feel free to tease me about it on the podcast.
Oh, wow. We will.
Not as much as we tease some people, but...
Some people ask for it much louder.
Last but not least, my mate is having a little trouble getting the first part of his short story submitted online. He told me the ones reviewing it are saying it's quote-unquote too dark. I've read it myself, and I understand what they mean by too dark, but at the same time I believe that that's the way the mood of the story is supposed to be. My question is, do you guys have any advice for him either where else he might be able to submit the story online, or any way he might be able to keep the same mood of the story, but not change or ruin the mood completely? Thanks a bunch, and hope you guys have a happy beginning of March. Love, Fraudus.
Yay, Fraudus.
March was okay.
I think, wasn't the beginning of March like the week that really, really sucked?
Yeah, there were a lot of people I know had a bad beginning of March.
Yeah, I think I had a fine beginning of March.
I had people with health problems and people who had parents pass away, and it's just
tax problems too.
Yeah, it was not a good month for a lot of people.
But we thank you for your good wishes. It would have been worse without those.
That's true. Can always be worse. That's a bad note. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say it can always be worse now.
Don't say that.
Speaking of which, about the thing about, this story's too dark.
Yeah, I figured you'd be an appropriate one to...
Yeah, if somebody says, this story's too dark, yeah, don't let people tell you that your story's too dark. Your story is as dark as it needs to be. I mean, what's the story about? I think I mentioned on the podcast once before where somebody had said, I really want to do this story, but it doesn't have a happy ending, and can you change that? And I'm like, well, if you think the mood is wrong for what you're putting out, then don't use this story, because that's not what this story is.
And secondly, who gave you my number?
Exactly.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say, I completely agree with that. The only thing I'll say is he's saying he's getting the first part of his first short story submitted online.
Yeah.
So that implies that he's submitting it to a market, like to an e-zine maybe.
Yeah.
So if you're submitting to Happy Pony Rainbow Zine, and they say your story's too dark, then you might want to change it up or submit it to a different market. If you're just trying to submit it to So Furry, then it doesn't really matter that it's too dark. It just matters that you have to figure out how the hell to get around their upload engine.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a case of people being like, this is too dark, it doesn't fit the mood of what we're putting together, or, this is too dark, and I personally don't like that, those are two different things.
Right. I would say if it's not fitting what you're trying to submit to, then either write a different story or find a different market.
Yeah.
But don't change the mood like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of being irresponsible to the story at that point, is the only thing I would say.
Yeah, I agree. That was easy. Hello there, KM Hirosaki and Kyle Gold. I was listening to episode 31 today where you were reading out some people's descriptions of their characters when I got to thinking, how the heck did I miss a listener challenge? Gah! Several head beatings and internal mental torment later, I finally got around to writing my own description. It's probably too late, and if you want to, go ahead and skip it. It was just a fun little blurb that I had a great time writing. I growled and let my twin tails twitch in hatred. Kyle was here. Spelled K-Y-L-E.
Yeah.
He always arrived just in time to ruin my fun. Like a mother swooping in from the shadows to catch her son stealing from the cookie jar and vanishing the second he was spanked. No, at least a mother had emotions. Kyle simply stood there, his ugly human form gazing over me with his empty gray eyes, wearing his gray sweatshirt, hood pulled down around his shoulders to expose his messy gray hair. That color described him perfectly. He was simply gray, and his appearance was just as bland. He had an average build, with average height, average weight, and I'm sure if I had checked he would have an average dick size too. There was nothing that defined him, and that itself was his most definitive feature. He never showed any emotion. After thousands of years, nothing could mold him. He was like a cement wall to which graffiti refused to stick. He made it his life's work to be as visually and mentally boring as he possibly could, and even as I stood here, my own paw in the cookie jar, I could see no emotional drive in his body, no anger in his eyes or frustration in his steps. I could only feel faint disapproval emanating from some mysterious source no doubt buried in his gray heart. Even as he spoke, there wasn't a single decibel of emotion as he interrupted my internal monologue. Amex put down the corpse. Anyway, I also have a question for you two. I am, like many it would seem, trying to write story with an intent on having it published. I do see a problem in the near future. I myself am not the best at editing. Most of my friends real life aren't furries and would probably cringe at any furry smut I slide into the novel, and the ones who wouldn't are also not the best at editing. So my question is, how would I go about finding someone to read through and help me edit my work? I know you guys mentioned a website made for this purpose, but otherwise I don't remember hearing any suggestions other than getting a friend to read through it. Thank you for your time. Shiru Takumi. Did I pronounce that right?
It's probably Takumi.
Takumi?
I actually have a friend whose son is named Takumi.
Ah. Shiru is probably French. So French,
well,
Japanese.
it's probably Shiro,
Shiro?
which is, yeah.
Ah.
It means like fourth-born son.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Learn something every day.
Or it could also be a last name, but depending on what it is. But anyway, there you go.
Interesting character piece. I'll just say that. As far as getting someone to edit your work, kind of goes back to what we said about, I mean, you have to be able to take part in it. And the best thing I can suggest is get better at editing. Because if you're going to seriously pursue writing, then you need to have at least some skill at editing. Because in order to get to a point where you can just throw your first draft at people and say, make that better, you need to be able to produce something that will allow you to reach that level. The way to get better at editing, which is not as tedious as it sounds, is to do a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Read writers that you admire, read classical authors, read works that other people say are good and well written, and then go back and read your own stories immediately after that, and compare the things that they're doing to the things that you're doing. Part of it also is getting proficient at grammar and spelling and punctuation and all the rules of technical rules, which
syntax and format and all that.
Yeah, and go out and buy Elements of Style and just read through it once. It's I know it's kind of tedious, especially if you didn't like learning grammar in school, but it's so valuable.
Yeah, and another thing that I'm going to suggest here, and I'm actually honestly surprised, I've never brought this up on the podcast before, but as I think of it, I don't recall ever doing so. Kyle was just saying about how you need to, be good at editing. Editing is a skill that you need to develop, just like writing. The ability to write is a skill you need to develop. And so if you're sitting out, it's like, I have this big novel idea, but you're not good at editing, I would really advise trying to learn how to edit by writing shorter stories first.
Yeah.
Because trying to learn how to edit with a giant, long opus, as excited as you might be to write it, if you already know that you don't have the editing chops to handle that, you may want to either leave that on the back burner or, write the first draft, set it aside, break in your editing chops on some short stories, and then come back to this thing and edit it later. Because it really is, you're going to be doing yourself and your story a disservice if you haven't honed the ability to make that the best you can make it.
I would agree with that. I will say though that I know that short story writing is sort of a companion skill to novel writing, And there are people who definitely are better at novels. There are people who are better at short stories.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And
And,
there's some
they're
people
not
that
the
can do
same
both.
skill. They're not the same talent at all.
And I would hate to see someone who is trying to write a novel get all frustrated because he can't write a short story. And if you find yourself unable to think of, a short story or an idea that you can write in 5 or 10,000 words, then just write one scene from your novel and make that scene pop.
Yeah. I mean, either way, not to, like you say, writing a short story and writing a novel are two very different things. But just to just get to mentally, train yourself to edit writing. I think editing a longer story and editing a shorter story are more closely connected than initially writing either of those things.
Yeah, probably. And another thing you can do, you don't necessarily have to have other people's permission, but go on to FA, go on to SoFurry, go on to Furrag, and look at some of the submissions that come up there, and just think about what would you suggest to these people to make their stories better. Again, don't necessarily communicate that, although most people who post stuff up will be happy to hear critiques, but
I don't know if I'd say most.
Well, many. At least, I keep hearing from people who are like, how can I get critiques on my work? And we're like, post it to FA, and they're like, yeah, but everybody there is just like, I wish I was at Fox, and that's about it. But, read a lot of the stuff that your peers are posting online. Read some of your friends' stories, and think really hard about what is this missing? Or how would you improve it? I don't want to necessarily imply that everything that gets posted is missing something, although it's, the further you go in, the harder it is to find something that you can't really make a suggestion toward. But, think about that, because it's easier to edit someone else's story than it is to edit your own.
It is, that's true.
But if you practice that, if you go through and you say, all right, this is how I would change this story, this is how I would improve it, this is what this story is missing, you become more apt to recognize it in your own work.
Right. And the other thing is that if you can really get down this impartialness and just being able to just sort of focus on, being able to improve things, not only will you have the ability to make a bad scene better, you'll also have the ability to make a good scene better.
Yeah.
And that's just
Excellent.
as important.
Good point. So there you go.
Yep.
And honestly, if you start posting good feedback on people's stories, other writers will find you, and people will ask you to edit their stuff.
Absolutely.
But
that's certainly worked for me.
But you also, last piece of advice, you also have to be careful. Don't just post something and say, wow, your characters in this story are really shallow, and I would, I couldn't relate to any of them, and I didn't really like the story. If you're giving somebody critique, give them a positive along with the way you'd improve it. But, mostly do it as an exercise for yourself. And when you gain some more confidence about being able to speak to what you see the problems in someone's story are, then, you'll find that more and more people will ask your advice, and you'll be much better at editing your own work.
Yeah. Well said. And our next email here, we have, greetings, Kyle and KM. My question today is very short, but you must know I have to ask. This has been on my mind for a long time, and my curiosity is killing me. Anyway, my question is, how did you, KM, and Kit meet? Like, when and where did you meet Kit for the first time, and how did you meet KM Hirosaki? I'm looking forward to hearing your different stories and thoughts. Andy.
Wow, how did Kit and I meet? We met through a mutual friend. Oddly enough, we met in person before meeting on the internet.
People do that, wow.
And the internet was still around at that time. We didn't meet that long ago. And we met a long time ago.
In a galaxy far, far away. Wait, no, this one.
No, in this galaxy, but a city far from this one. And having met, I think it was just like one night. It was Kit was in town for dinner, and we met and hung out, and then we started chatting online, and many years later I moved in with him, and then we started doing a podcast.
We'll skip all the juicy bits and the stuff that Cam Hirosaki writes about sometimes.
Well, Kit, if you didn't catch that on the mic, Kit is admitting that the first time he met our mutual friend who introduced us, he was not wearing pants. But I will say that the mutual friend did not introduce us with the intention that we get together. It was just sort of a, we both knew him and we're both in town at the same time, and so we ended up meeting. And, things then went on from there in the way that young, furry internet people do. You can fill in details and probably wouldn't be too far off. And then how did we meet KM? Oh, I sent KM a letter.
Yeah. Kyle emailed me out of the blue.
I emailed him and said, because I was trying to help SoFolf get some more authors into Heat. And I remembered having read on Yifstar years and years ago those early stories, which featured a fox and otter, I believe.
Yeah, that's...
I think you may have taken
there's
them
your
down.
symmetry. We got your symmetry back, Kyle.
Yeah?
Those are still online. I haven't taken them down.
Are they?
Yep, they're still up.
But they were very cute stories, and I was impressed because they were a cut above what I saw on Yifstar usually. And we emailed back and forth for a while, and that was right after my first book had come out.
Yeah, so I actually hadn't read anything by Kyle's yet because he was only just starting to put his stuff online. He had just posted White Knight, actually. Mm-hmm. And you said, hey, here's my story if you want to see what my stuff is like. And it was like a few weeks later, I went to Anthrocon, and that's where I picked up my copy of All when it had just come out. And it was so funny because one of my friends was there at the table, and I'm like, is this... Oh, yeah, you know what? You didn't even tell me you had written it. I found it. I was at the SoFolf table, and I saw your name on a book, and I'm like, that son of a bitch. He didn't tell me he had a book out. And I was like, well, this is this guy I've been talking about. I have to read his book. And I saw it had, the adults-only tag in the corner, and I asked somebody, and I'm like, is this got a bunch of sex scenes in it? And he goes, oh, there's one scene right towards the end where it's vaguely alluded to, but that's it. And this is a friend who had read it and was obviously pulling my leg,
messing with you.
Yeah, because then I was reading it on the plane on my flight back from Anthrocon. I was like, oh, hello, I was misled. But no, it's funny because we were emailing back and forth about writing because we're clearly both very into it, as you can tell. And after going back and forth a few times, we learned just completely coincidentally that we lived 15 minutes away from each other.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of wait, hold on. Then it's do you want to grab dinner sometime and hang out? And that's when Kyle's like, okay, but I'm bringing my wolf with me. Don't think this is something it's not. And I'm like, no, it's totally not. And there was wine and hanging out.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then after dinner we brought him back here, and Kit plied him with wine. Thus began the first of...
that's how I knew Kit was going to be my friend.
That was the first of that tradition. Coke Zero had not been invented yet, so...
It had not.
I was drinking diet sodas at that point. I don't know what I was drinking, though.
I will say that the very first time that we met in person, I was wearing nail polish.
You were. You had just gotten your pride on.
Mm-hmm.
As I recall.
I was priding it up like a mofo.
It made him easy to find. He lit up the room
with my bedazzlement.
Walked into the restaurant, and I'm like, "Now, where's the guy I'm supposed to meet? Oh, it's the one on fire over there."
Oh, I just did a little gay chuckle too. That wasn't even on purpose.
You're so cute. All right. Okay. This next one will be kind of quick, and then we have one from Lovejoy that we can make fun of. First off, I just want to start by saying, great job. I'm currently trying to catch up downloading the rest of what I don't have on my iPod. I was just wondering how you both chose your species. Just an interesting little thing that crossed my mind. Your friendly Arctic fox, Kaltebild. Kalte Bild. Sounds
Yeah.
Norwegian almost.
You had to, didn't you?
Yeah. We just been watching Pushing Daisies, so there was a Norwegian episode where they all dressed
Hit
in
me in the
Norwegian
face with
flag-themed
with
uniform.
a yellow and blue sock, and then got high off of ABBA and meatballs. Sweets. I'm gonna go out and kind of have the cop-out answer and say that my species chose me.
God damn it, that's what I was going to say.
That's why I had to speak first. No, actually, I remember just sort of being one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, you're in the furry fandom, you sort of have this species, and just sort of like, I thought about it, I'm like, I kind of get the impression that I'm an otter, and I just sort of went with that, and nobody has really
Changed your mind.
Nobody's changed my mind, and nobody has contested that assertion. So,
And actually, a couple of our friends have said that you seem very otterish in person.
yeah.
And for my part, I will not say that since you said it. I will say that I've been in the furry fandom for a long time, going on. Let's just say if there was someone who was born the first time I logged into Furry Muck, they could now vote. But
I haven't gone by the name Obi-Wan since so before you were born. A long time.
But I've
Long time.
And in my younger furry days, I experimented a little bit. I tried being. I had a bunch of different species knocking around, and most of them didn't last more than a little while. But it was always the canids, and then after a few years, specifically the foxes, that I just kind of found out I didn't play any of the other characters. I just kept playing the foxes, and that's what feels right to me.
If any of you ever meet Kyle in person, you will not question the fox thing. It's in him through and through.
Actually, it's the wolf thing that's in me, but that's
Well,
not
if
all
your
the
fans
time.
are meeting you in person, that's probably not going to be the case at the time.
I'm hoping not, unless I got real desperate for money. But why don't you close us out here while Kit turns bright red over in the corner there.
Okay. Hi, fellas. I'm taking a break from writing overly critical notes about your stories to send you an email. I was wondering how you... I'm so sorry.
No, keep doing it.
I just broke the whole crew.
Keep doing it. It's perfect.
I've just ruined a friendship. I was
think
wondering
maybe
how
3
you
of
guys
them.
feel about autobiographical adventures or travel literature. As a journalist... Oh my god.
Now you have to do like, okay, shut up.
Alright guys, we're going to be very serious. Savern has to finish his email. As a journalist, it's really the closest I'll ever get to writing a novel, but writing anecdotal nonfiction presupposes that you have an interesting life, which if I did, I wouldn't spend my time reading furry novels and then making fun of them on the internet. Now, the both of you travel enough where I would guess that there are a number of experiences worth sharing. Is LiveJournal enough for you? Or have either of you thought of becoming the fandom's Malcolm Gladwell or Bill Bryson? You both seem interesting enough, and a book chronicling a year of furcons or whatever might be interesting, despite the marginally fewer blowjobs compared to one of your fiction stories. From Lovejoy. Oh, well, Lovejoy, you're presupposing the number of blowjobs I get when I travel, so...
I feel compelled to point out also that he misspelled Malcolm Gladwell's name, but that's only because he's a journalist, and I think we may have to give him a non-passing grade for that letter.
I'm so sad that this is not a video podcast because the look on your two's faces was just priceless.
Well, if you folks out there don't know Lovejoy, he's a weasel. We'll just say that, and that about covers it up.
He's a good guy, honest.
No, he is. We like him. We wouldn't make fun of him on the air if we didn't like him. We'd make fun of him after the microphones were off if we really didn't like him.
We care.
All you people out there that we don't make fun of on the air, now you know.
As for writing travel,
I'm looking at you, President Obama.
As for writing travel journalism, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
What did that mean?
I don't know. We like President Obama.
I don't know what that means.
He's good to gay people. He said we can go visit our partners in the hospitals.
Whoa.
Yay for him.
Bam. I think that if I had an interesting enough vacation that I could turn into a fun anecdote, I wouldn't be opposed to trying to write that. I think that take a year of your life and just sort of chronicle it. I'm not sure if doing that ahead of time without knowing how interesting it's going to be would really be my style.
Well, then if you say you're going to do that, then you kind of take steps to make sure it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Like, Kit and I a couple years ago had thought I don't remember how this came about, but we just kind of thought we need more stories. And so we thought, often we're presented with opportunities to do things, and we're kind of like, it would be a lot of trouble. I'm sure it wouldn't be worth it. And we thought, once or twice when something like that comes up, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. And, I know we've done things. I'm trying to remember if any real good stories have come out of them that we can share on the air.
Like the time you guys raided that Aztec tomb.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were there. They said, do you want to come raid it with us? And we were like, well, we're kind of tired. We were thinking about just going back to the hotel, but, it'd be a good story. And, maybe we'll get a curse we can bring back.
I was going to say, it might not be worth the curse of Quetzalcoatl, but, hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah, well, big feather-winged serpents. I think the interesting thing about Malcolm Gladwell and Bill Bryson is that they have very particular talents toward digging out the real interesting things in real life. Actually, I think my favorite Bill Bryson book is I'm a Stranger Here Myself, where he comes to the United States, or was it the year he was living in England? I forget which way he went.
I haven't read that one.
It's basically a series of essays about weird things that people do in one country or another.
I could certainly write about that.
And I think I'm a little too wedded to the truth when it comes to my own life to be able to
playfully embellish.
And Malcolm Gladwell's kind of the same way. He's as much as admitted that his story on the moth, which is supposed to be real stories from true life, he basically said has been kind of embellished. It didn't quite go down the way he said it. But he also has a real good talent for digging into motivations and what makes people interesting on their own. And while I think, we kind of have to have that for our fictional characters, I'm not sure how... I think it's kind of a slightly different talent than applying it to real people.
Yeah. And I will say, when it comes to my amusing personal anecdotes, those are the things that I enjoy telling in person, but I'm not sure I would enjoy so much just writing them down. Like, if you ever got me at dinner or out for drinks or something, then I will cheerfully give you my playful spin on wacky things that have happened to me, and I'll yammer your ear off if you let me and keep buying me things to drink. But I think that sort of almost storytelling performance, and not I think that committing it down to written form would almost ruin the magic.
And I know that the Sofa Wolf guys have done a storytelling thing at Midwest Fur Fest the last couple years, which
if I go to Midwest this year, maybe I can.
Which might be worth checking out. I think it didn't Notcast actually release it this year as one of their episodes?
Notcast did it as a Notcast Presents.
Yeah, so it's just not something in written form. The other thing, and this is really the big limiting factor for me, is I barely have time to write all the fiction that I want to write.
Yeah, that's the other thing for me, too.
So, as much as nonfiction might be appealing, I have plenty of stories in my head that are begging to be written, and I need to write them first.
Yeah. Truth is stranger than fiction sometimes, so...
I don't know if truth is stranger than gay furry porn.
There's stuff I probably shouldn't say. I will say that my life has surprised me.
With
that's all
humanoid
I'll say.
animal people having gay sex.
Okay, well,
Because, I mean, if so, I think you've been holding out. And I think you owe us some
you know I would never hold
explanations.
out. Oh, God.
I think we've seen
just-
several stories that prove that point.
I was going to say, either just shot myself in the foot or in the face. I don't know which.
I think you shot yourself somewhere else.
Yeah, I was going to
But,
say, I certainly shot myself in some form or another.
so, I think with
Happy
that,
podcast.
I do appreciate the suggestion and the confidence that mentioning us in the same sentence with Malcolm Gladwell or Bill Bryson, albeit the qualifier of the fandoms, but I appreciate being mentioned in that company. I have a great deal of respect for both of those writers.
Yeah.
They're terrific. And you people who are looking for ways to tell a good story, you could do worse than pick up Bill Bryson.
Yeah. Maybe I can also be equated to, like, the furry fandom's Lady Gaga or something.
I think you have to release an avant-garde music video first.
Okay, I'll work on that.
All right?
In between all the fiction writing and autobiographical travelogues.
Wouldn't that be autobiographical?
Where's Atari when we need him? He needed to make that joke.
I think he's in Salt Lake City. But our Tex Heavy Wolf has given us the "you've been talking too long" sign, and so I think we are going to wrap it up. Send us more questions. We would love to hear from you guys at unsheathedpodcast@gmail.com. If you have good editing examples, if I were to call somebody specifically out on the podcast, I would say probably Condrel and Pyro would be good candidates, but anyone who wants to send one in, I just figured I'd sort of nudge those two.
Yeah, when you said that, I tried to, like, look suggestively at the microphone, like, yeah, guys, and I'm like, oh, wait, they can't see that. So,
Plus, when you look suggestively at the microphone, it means something else, too. Oh, get your mouth off of there. We're also Unsheathed on FA, Kyle Gold on Twitter, and kylegold.livejournal.com is where I keep all of my Bill Bryson, Malcolm Gladwell-esque writings for the moment.
yep, and I'm Cam Hirosaki on Twitter, Cam Hirosaki at LiveJournal, where I mostly just put my writing and stuff about my writing. I don't do too much about my personal life on there.
And thank you for sticking with us through 37 episodes.
Yes.
In a row.
Sticking with us. Like a fox.
Try not to record any podcasts on your way into the parking lot. Good night, all. Keep writing.
Yes, please do.